Hello, welcome. In this video, we'll do an overview of the report card basic, an Excel template. This template is suited to create student report cards that look something like this in schools and other educational institutions where you conduct tests or assessments for students. The template also creates a couple of other meaningful views of the student performance data. This has been created for scenarios where the evaluation method is calculating marks as percentages. So marks scored by the student divided by the maximum possible marks in that test. This template can be downloaded for free from inzara.blogspot.com, and this is the blog post about this specific template. There are two documents here for download. One of them is the actual template, and the other one is the template with sample data. In this video, we will download the version with the sample data and go over the features of the template. We have now opened the template with the sample data. Simple instructions are provided at the top on the left. There are navigation options on the top right where you can move within this template by clicking these hyperlinks. As you can see here, there is placeholder where you can enter your school information and the class information. These will be used while printing the report from this template. In this sample, I have entered 40% as the percentage required to pass. This will be used by the template to automatically highlight if a student has scored some marks which are less than the percentage required to pass. It will automatically highlight that specific student's performance. There is an option to choose yes or no for final marks calculation. This is used where you would calculate the final performance of a student in an academic year by looking at the performance of the student in tests throughout the academic year. So you may give weights for each of the tests throughout the year in order to calculate the final marks for the student for that academic year. In many scenarios, in many schools, that does happen. If in your case, you don't need to calculate such final marks, then you could choose no in this drop-down menu. So for example, in this sample data, I have 12 different tests that the students would go through in that academic year. I have named them assessment 1 through assessment 12. You could name your tests however you have in your scenario. And also you can have up to 12, but you may just have 3 or 4 or 6. You would just enter whatever number of tests you have in your scenario. And then because I want to calculate my final marks, I'm going to give weights for each of these tests. In this case, I've given 5% weight to the first 6 assessments or tests, and then 10% to the next 5, and 20% to the last assessment. And this is one way of doing it. In your scenario, you may have 100% of the weight based on the last assessment or test that you conducted. In that case, you would replace this 20% with 100%, and then you would make all of these 0%. That would still work. So this is very flexible. You could use this template to capture any possible scenario where you are giving different weights to each of the tests. Finally, in the settings worksheet, you would see placeholders for entering subject names. And I have entered 12 different subjects here. You could choose to enter up to 12, how many ever you may have. A couple of things to note about these two tables here. Please make sure that you don't repeat the same test name again. You want to have unique test names, and also you want to have unique subject names here for the template to work correctly. And also, as the note here says, please enter the test names, for example, without leaving a blank in between. Similarly, enter the subject names consecutively instead of having a blank in between. That will cause the template to not function properly. So that's it with the settings worksheet. Now that we have completed step 1, let's go to step 2, which is to go to the entry worksheet. You can go there by clicking this link at the top. And now you are in the second worksheet, which is where you would enter information about the students and how much did they score, and also the maximum marks that a student can score in each of the tests for each subject. The test names and then the subject names here at the top are automatically populated, so you don't need to worry about them. You would have to enter the maximum marks that the students can score. So for example, in assessment 1 for language subject, a student can score a maximum of 50 marks. So you would enter 50. That's what I've entered for all these 4 subjects that we see here. And then you would enter the student roll numbers and then the student names here. I have entered in this sample data for 10 students. You can enter up to 50 students by scrolling further down. And then you can enter more information or information about more tests and subjects by scrolling to your right. You can enter more. You will see that there are more subjects and also more tests. Now, one last thing before we go to the next step, please make sure that you understand that the student performance will be calculated as percentages. So in this case, for example, the student Ramanuja scored 44 out of 50 in language in assessment 1. That means he's going to get scored 88%. And Raman scored 43 out of 50. That means he will have 86% as a score. Now that we have entered all the data that we have about the student performances, now it's time to go and see the results. So let's go to class view first. In the class view, at the top, you will see the basic information about the school and the class. There are 2 tables here in this class view. The first one is called average marks. In this table, you would see, for example, for all students in assessment 1 for language subject, the average score was 79.8%. If you had chosen final marks calculation in the settings worksheet back at the beginning, if you had chosen yes, then you will see this column get populated automatically. This is the calculation that's based on giving weights to each of these 12 tests. For example, let's go back and look at the settings. So I had given 5%, 10%, and 20% as weights to these different tests. So that is taken into account, and the final percentage for each subject is calculated. And since this is a table for average, so this 68.3% represents the average score, average final score for language in this class. The other thing you will notice in this table is that some values are highlighted with dark orange font. That represents the subject with the least average in each of these tests. This is just a quick way of identifying the relatively weaker subject for the class. And if you see a specific subject being always the weakest, then that might tell you an opportunity that you have to concentrate in the class. Now, the second table in this class view is nothing but the number of failures or number of students who have failed in each of these assessments or tests in each of these subjects. So for example, there were 4 students who did not meet the percentage required to pass in assessment 1 for the subject geography. And they are highlighted in dark red font so that it's easy for you to see. Now that's it with the class view. Let's go to the next view, which is our subject view. You can go to the subject view by clicking the link at the top here. This takes you to the subject view. Again, just like the class view, you have the basic information at the top, and then you have a drop-down menu. You would choose the subject. So this is where you would choose a specific subject that you want to take a look into. For example, let me choose English. So for English, then this table gets populated. If I choose mathematics, again, the table gets populated. So this gives the performance of each student in that subject throughout the year. For example, I have all the 10 students here, all the 12 tests here, and you can see how the student has performed in this subject over time. And also you would see there are values with the dark green font which highlight the top score in each of the assessments or tests. And in this case, for example, 96% was the top for this subject mathematics in assessment 1. And the dark red values are the values where they did not meet the minimum percentage required to pass. That means they have failed that subject. Also, if you had chosen the final marks calculation in the settings worksheet, you will see the final percentages also calculated for each student in this subject. That's what we have in the subject view. The final view is the student view, where this is all about a specific student. So for example, you would have the basic information about the school and the class at the top. And here in the student name, you would be able to choose any specific student in your class, and then this table gets updated accordingly. And one thing you would notice here is that there is the final result that's calculated for the student, and this is the overall pass or fail result for the student for the entire academic year, and also the final class rank and then overall percentage. Below that, there is a table where you would see the student's performance, specific student that you have selected, performance of that student in each of the subject across all the tests, calculated as percentages. Also, you would see the final percentage for each subject calculated based on the weights given in the settings worksheet. Below that table, you also see the total marks that the student has scored and the maximum marks for that test, and then also percentage of that. It also gives a pass or a fail result. This is calculated by if the student has passed all the subjects in that test, he gets a pass result. If he didn't, he gets a failed result. So for example, in assessment 2, the student had failed in geography, which is highlighted in the red font here, and that's why he gets a failed status or failed result for that test. And also there is a class rank that's calculated. This is based on, for all the students who have passed in that test, looking at the total marks, this class rank gives the rank of that specific student. So for example, in this case, there were 2 other students in the class who scored higher than the specific student in assessment 1. And if you don't pass, then you don't get a rank, you just get an NR, which stands for no rank. And this is done for each test. And also in the final case, like if you want to do final calculation, then that is also done, and that's what's represented here at the top. More information about how these calculations are done or is also presented here. At the bottom, there are placeholders where the school principal, class teacher names or signatures can be entered, and then the document can be dated. This could be useful if you're printing this document and then signing them and then handing it over to your students. Now in this template, all the sheets that you see here can be readily printed. They are just set up for printing, so you can print all these documents as you need. So with that, we've gone through the sample data now. And if you would like to use this template, if you see a need for this template, then I would suggest that you go back to the blog inzara.blogspot.com and download the default template, which doesn't have any sample data, because that allows you to get started very quickly. And when you download it, it's going to look something like this, where there is nothing in it. All the sheets will be empty. So when you start entering information in the settings worksheet and in the entry sheet, you would start seeing the class view, subject view, and student view automatically get populated. So I hope you find this template useful. If you have any questions about the template, or if your requirements are not addressed in this template, please provide me your feedback at inzara.blogspot.com. I look forward to your feedback. Thanks for watching the video.